Welcome to Latter Daily Digest. We have today as our special guest our wonderful Radio Free Mormon. We're going to find out a little bit about his background and how he became Radio Free Mormon. And co-hosting with me today is Jean Judson. Hey, Jean. Let's get started. Radio Free Mormon, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, hey, everybody. I'm Radio Free Mormon. And we've been going at this for so long now that I'll just go ahead and say I got a podcast. It's called Radio Free Mormon. And I'm also co-host, as it says there underneath my face, co-host of Mormonism Live. Radio Free Mormon is in its 8th year of production now, starting with its first episode, October 23rd, 2016. And now I'm up in the 300s somewhere, the low 300s.
And we'll provide a link to the very first Radio Free Mormon episode.
Oh, good.
And so I know that you were moved back and forth from Texas to the Pacific Northwest in your youth.
How do you know this about me? Have you been following me?
I have. You probably don't recognize me. I was in one of your classes in 3rd grade in the very back, and stuff like that. I'm following
you were the guy who was breaking his probation.
I have listened to probably everything you've ever done, just about since Radio Free Mormon, and a lot of them twice, and some of them 3 times.
Which one have you listened to 3 times?
Oh,
it's captured your imagination so much.
Well, actually, your
that.
number 1 Radio Free Mormon show.
Yeah.
About hiding history.
That's a good one.
Great Mormon History Cover-Up.
The Great Mormon History Cover-Up, and I've seen it, I've heard it a dozen times, at least.
Why?
And I've shared it with people.
Why?
It's a really good starting place for people.
Why?
Because it has so much information. And, I so respected Boyd K. Packer when I was young. He was like the man. And now I can see the man behind the curtain a little bit with that episode. So we'll have that as a teaser. And so
everybody knows, Gene. So everybody knows, number one, it's what I started with because I thought it was very, very important. And I got off kind of with a bang because it was very well received. And what it is a breakdown of Boyd K. Packer's talk, the mantle is far, far greater than the intellect. And what it shows, beyond any doubt, is that not only did Boyd K. Packer know things about church history that he thought were not faith promoting, he also actively encouraged and even threatened church professors and church seminary teachers and institute instructors that they needed to keep this stuff hidden as well.
It was like the Iron Curtain of correlation.
Yep.
And
now,
so
RFM.
Go ahead.
Sorry. I was just going to ask, which prophet was the most prominent when you were growing up? Because you grew up LDS. So which one was the most prominent for you?
Spencer Kimball.
Spencer Kimball. Okay.
Yeah, he was president from 73 to 85. So when I joined the church in 1978, he was the president and was for my formative years in Mormonism.
Okay.
That's right.
Not really.
And you know what? One thing, Radio Free Mormon is well known for his magic. And I was wondering, what was your first interest in magic?
My first interest in magic was when I was in 4th grade. And so I'm 10 years old, and every year, was it more often than every year? I can't remember, but you may recall that Scholastic Books had this deal with the schools where they would shill for them. And what they would do is they would come in and they would have just sort of a newsprint kind of, catalog about books that you could order. And then you would check the books you wanted, and you go and beg to your parents to try and get some money. And the parents say, oh, he wants to read, so we'll fork over some money. And then
45 cents.
Yeah, whatever it was. It was certainly, not as much as today. But you wait, and then you get the books, and it's just like magic. That was my experience.
I got 100 jokes.
Really? Yeah. What was your favorite?
I think I got book by Beverly Cleary, like something about a mouse. Can't remember what it was. The Littles or something like that.
Don't forget the Ramona books.
Ramona, that's
Beverly Cleary on Klickitat Avenue or something where they lived.
Yeah.
Which was
so I'm good
in
at
Oregon,
trivia,
I think.
but I am 1/10 good at trivia as Radio Free Mormonism. And the secret of being good at trivia is to tell people what you know, not to say that you don't know something.
Is that the trick? Well, you may be thinking about the mouse and the motorcycle. That was very popular.
The mouse and the motorcycle. I wanted to be a mouse with a motorcycle because of that book.
Yeah. Well, so do you have a motorcycle yet, or are you only halfway there?
I got a motorcycle when I was 18 or 19, and then my brother had a motorcycle as well. He's 18 months older than me, and he got in an accident. And when I saw him getting hurt, well, I didn't see it, but the outcome of the bike, I thought, you know what? I'm going to try not to be in a vehicle that is so, outnumbered in like the size. It's a mismatch. And so
other cars on the road.
Cars.
Oh, yeah, you're completely exposed. You're the vulnerable one when you're on a motorcycle.
Yeah. So you got a magic book when you were in 4th grade.
Yes, it was called Spooky Fun. And I didn't get it for the magic in it. I got it because there was a ghost on the cover, and I was so into spooky stuff, staying up late on Friday nights watching Nightmare Theater on Channel 7, Cairo, the local CBS affiliate. And so I got this. It's got some jokes, it's got some stories, but also has a couple of little magic tricks that are presented in kind of a spooky way. And there was one magic trick in there that captured me because with my 10-year-old mind, it just seemed so amazing. It's a self-working card trick. I mean, it is for kids, right? But I did that and it just worked. I performed it for myself over and over again going, this is just amazing. How does this work? I know how it works, but I'm still amazing myself by it. So that was really where it started.
There you go. And then, so you right after getting baptized, you were able to serve a mission. So I was a lifelong member and I was too afraid to go on a mission. So I applaud you for diving into Mormonism and doing your duty and going to Japan.
I'm a slave to duty.
And so, here's another thing.
You didn't go on a mission. Now, hang on a second here, because you remember your whole life. By the way, I want to tell you, it was scary going on a mission. I'm the only member of the church in my family. I'm going to go on a mission. I've got, support with friends and stuff who are members of the church. But going on that mission, it was all sunshine and lollipops and golden in advance until I got really, really close to it. And then it started becoming very real to me about this investment, this adventure I was going to go on for 2 years. And it became, I understand the fear about it.
And I thought you had to be perfect, and I was far from perfect, because the church says, you can't even, borrow a pencil from work and forget about it. You've really stolen from your company. And so there's all these little rules that, you had to repent of, that were just, you could do something and not even know you were sinning at first. And then the church tells you that it's a sin. And so I was kind of, what do they call that? Where you OCD about religion.
Scrupulosity.
And I was sort of like that, but not good enough to really be scrupulous about it. You know what I mean? I mean, I was better at sinning than repenting in a way,
Well, it's your gift to the Spirit then.
Yeah. So
with your mission to Japan, I have 2 questions. How did your family feel about that? Actually,
that is
your
a moderately interesting answer, which is that I've got a dad who's an atheist, my mom who's a nondescript Protestant and had never been to church in my entire life. She had been a Baptist, by the way. We were talking about Summer and before we started recording. That's why I said it that way. She had been a Baptist. Have you ever been a Baptist, Summer?
I have never been a Baptist. My father was a Baptist.
Okay. Have you ever been accused of being a Baptist?
I've been accused of being a Baptist.
How did that happen?
That's for my That's from my story.
Show.
That's from my Latter Daily Digest.
Okay, because I was going to ask Gene, what kind of pushback did you get for not going on a mission?
So a little bit of pushback. I was the teachers quorum president. We had 24 names on the rolls, of which about 12 of the boys were active. But I was looking at in my ward that we had like 0 Eagle Scouts from that group, which is like a prep for going on a mission. And a handful of the kids did serve on missions, but there were so many, I guess they were just like happy for me to still be at church compared to all the sort of drop off that they were experiencing. But anyway, your brother was Jehovah's Witness.
And that's good. And to get back to your question, before we go to my brother, the J-Dub, Summur, my dad, on the other, he's an atheist.
Mhm.
And when it came time for me being baptized, I think my brother had already beat me to the joining the church rush when he became a J-Dub. Sometime, I'm
Got
pretty
it.
sure, before I became a Jehovah's Witness. And so they'd already kind of gone through that with my brother Cam. And now I'm going to become a Mormon. And they like my friends. Mormons have this nice, wholesome reputation.
Persona. Right.
Yeah. And my friend, they liked my friend. So, but my dad, he
compared
was
to the
not
gang banging Jehovah's Witnesses. Just teasing.
I know. If you ever have J-Dubs over or invite them in, you need to count your silverware after they leave. I'm just saying. Okay. Because they will rob you blind. So anyway, my dad was not really in favor of my being baptized. Now, he didn't insert himself in it or tell me not to, but he was not that pleased about my being baptized. My mom, on the other hand, was very enthusiastic about my being baptized because she had seen this burgeoning Christianity in me for many years on occasion. And when it came to my mission, though, they reversed their roles. My dad was in favor of my going on a mission to Japan because he felt that was a positive thing to spend a couple of years between high school and college to get some real world experience. And he thought that was favorable. So he supported my mission. My mom, however, was not happy about my going on my mission because it was to Japan and I'm the baby of the family.
Yeah.
I actually remember having a phone call with her at the airport on the way out, January 1980, on the way over to Japan after the 2 months in the MTC, and talking to her. Now, I had saved enough money to get myself outfitted, to get myself flown down to Provo, to get myself through the MTC, and to get myself an airplane flight with the other guys across the ocean to Japan. But by the time I landed, I was tapped out. So I relied not only on my 70s quorum, back when they had those in the stake, but also on my folks. And they split it 50-50 for my mission. So I was relying on them to finance this once I'd gotten to Japan. And I had this phone call with my mom where she was suggesting to me that maybe it would be a good idea if I just served for 6 months. And I'm, it's like the missionaries are around like, Mom, come on, the guys are here.
Do that.
You can't do 6 months. It's not optional. I have given up my entire freedom of choice here. I am enlisted until the conflict is o'er, and it's not going to be o'er until 2 years.
Right.
But think of the story. Oh, I left my mission after only serving 6 months. Why? Because my mommy wanted me to come home.
I know. Wouldn't that be horrible? Like I left my mission in San Francisco.
Well, I was just curious because even as faithful members, mothers have had a hard time with their sons leaving, and that's understanding why. So I'm always interested to hear non-member moms how they handle that and nowadays, there's a lot more communication. I think back then it was just Mother's Day and Christmas, correct?
Yes.
And just letters. And now you can, I think it's once a week, they can talk on the phone and they get the social media. So it's a lot more contact, but I have one son and he's only 9, and I would be very sad to see him go for 2 years and only hear from him twice a year. So I was just curious if you're not a member as a mother. So that makes sense. 6 months, kind of like when you're sentenced to go to jail for 2 years. Like, I think I'm just going to do 6 months.
I should get some credit for good time.
Yeah, I did well for the 6 months. So that's very
That's
interesting.
right.
The other question I had was the word of wisdom.
Mm.
How did that work out there in Japan, given that they do a lot of hot drinks, a lot of tea?
hmm
I know there's kind of a back and forth about what tea we can drink and not drink, and Diet Coke and Coke and all that. But what do they say in Japan?
What they say in Japan, what we were instructed to say in Japan, because of course, if we're lucky enough to get into a freaking house,
Yes.
oh my gosh. But if we're lucky enough to get in there, the first thing they're going to do is offer tea,
Yes.
because that's like all they drink. I hear they drink a lot of that in England as well. But Japan, of course, I mean, they got a whole ceremony around tea, but
Right.
they'd offer tea. And what we were instructed to say is that we are following a Tokubetsu na Kenko Programu.
Oh.
And that's a special health program. We were not to link it to the church because we didn't want to let them know at the outset that if they did listen and hear all the discussions and hopefully read from the Book of Mormon and got a testimony of it, and we get to the 6th discussion where we're at the commandments and the word of wisdom, we don't want them to know up front that we're going to be asking them that at the end. Otherwise, we're never going to get to the 2nd discussion.
That's right. The milk before the tea.
Everything is about transparency in this church.
Yes. Yes. And they don't need to know that they're going to trade one ceremony in for another.
That's a good point. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know if Japanese like the temple ceremony more than perhaps non-Japanese people, or if people who are more into ceremony and ritual might be more. I expect they would be.
Somewhat, but I mean, the tea ceremony, as you know, has such a special importance to them that I do feel it would feel like taking away the LDS ceremony from an LDS person, saying, "Oh, I'm not gonna tell you about this, but at some point you're gonna have to stop doing this." But it's all about transparency because we want to be upfront and honest in the beginning.
We will do anything we can to get somebody baptized, even if we have to hide things from them up front. And frankly, that's really what the missionary discussions are designed to do. They're designed to give you the very, very basics so that you can get baptized based upon very little information. And the little information you're getting is extremely slanted toward the church and its truth claims.
Yes.
Heart cell discussion style.
Yeah.
Heart cell. Mm-hmm.
Well, just to jump on that, I told you yesterday, my father was baptized in 83. So that was only a couple years after the priesthood ban was lifted. And he didn't even know there was a priesthood ban. So that was not put in the discussions at all leading up to. And then the night before he was baptized, I think one of his family members told him in Florida, and that was a whole other thing. But it's just interesting that something so close to the ban being lifted was still not discussed. He got all the other discussions.
Here's your reminder. Go
Oh,
through
hi,
papers.
Jane.
What is it you have to go do?
I think Jane has to go through. I think Jane has to
Oh,
go
it's
through.
Jane.
Go through my papers because I have a stack of mail and stuff like that. So Alexa reminds me every day. I think she's in love with me.
Nice.
I usually
So,
just
yeah.
put them in a stack, and I see the stack and I remember. But
Yeah, I don't know why I can't remember without being reminded.
That's fine.
So you serve an honorable mission.
you're getting a
And
lot of mail, Gene. Where are you getting all this mail from?
it's mostly junk mail. It has my name on it, so it makes me feel important.
Okay.
But,
It's not nice to call fan mail junk, Gene. That's not nice. Your fans will be very
Yeah,
offended.
the IRS is a big fan of mine. No, I'm
Mhm.
kidding.
As well as your other creditors.
Right, creditors. And you go to Texas University. What's it called?
The University of
mission.
Texas.
University of Texas.
Just it's the university that's in Texas.
Are they the Hook'em
There
Horns?
are others, but not really. There's only
Are-
one university in Texas, and it's UT, baby.
Are they the Hook'em Horns?
Yes.
Hook 'em horns.
Yeah.
And did you decide then to pursue law?
No. Of course not. No. What I did was I got bit by the dance bug when I was 16. So that would be 1976. And I was with the dance studio for 3 years. I was torn away from that, much against my will, to go on a mission to Japan for 2 years. And upon returning, I took up dancing again, went to the University of Texas at Austin for a 4-year Bachelor of Arts degree with a major in dance.
Wow.
Oh, you didn't know that?
I don't do as much research as Jean does, apparently. But this
No.
is where we go to interlude and you stand up and do a little tap.
Oh, I can't do really much tap here. I've got my tennis shoes on. And besides which, you'd sort of be looking at my crotch while I was doing it. If I stood up, right, it would be one prolonged crotch.
That's right. Boxers or briefs. No, I'm just kidding. So,
yes.
So one thing the mission
give a
did help
totally
you.
new meaning to the phrase soft shoe.
Yeah. One thing the mission prepared you for dance was to be light on your feet, right?
I was actually quite a good tap dancer.
So you majored
Jazz
in dance.
And ballet, not really.
What did your father think about majoring in dance? Because he was more prone to the logical. Am I correct?
Yes. He was a rocket scientist, literally.
Yes.
So when it came to my dance, very interesting. I didn't speak that much to my dad. He didn't speak that much to me, really. He was old enough to be my grandfather. He was born December 26, 1919.
Wow.
So really, not that long after World War I ended. And children were more to be seen and not heard. I couldn't tell you how many times I heard that expression growing up. But they heard me a lot anyway. But we didn't have this huge, close relationship or anything. Mm-hmm. But I remember specifically going to him before I enrolled in courses, just after my mission at the University of Texas, and just struggling, thinking, I really love dance. That's what I want to do. But on the other hand, where's that going to leave me? And shouldn't I be more pragmatic in getting some kind of degree that can earn money? And my dad refused to give me any advice.
Wow.
He said, you should do what you want to do. I'm not going to give you any advice on this. So I said, okay, then dance major I am.
Dance it is. Wow. Mm-hmm. So what changed that trajectory?
Starvation.
From dance to law.
Mostly.
The thought of starving in the future?
No, starvation after graduating with a dance degree.
Oh.
You can't do anything with a dance degree. My gosh. Dance degree. What a dumb thing that is. Either you can dance or you can't. And believe it or not, when you're auditioning, nobody gives a flying where you went to school or what degree you have. All they care is if you can dance. So, but I had a lot of fun, and then starvation afterward. And then I decided I needed to do something that I could earn some money at. And I actually sat down. I remember sitting down and thinking, what can I do? And I thought, well, what am I good at? And I thought, well, I'm okay at speaking because missionary stuff and teaching, that's because of Mormonism. Mm-hmm. Speaking, I'm okay at writing. And I argue, I've certainly been arguing a lot with, Baptists, Summur.
And your brother.
Yeah. And so I can do that. And I thought, well, what is it that I could do with those skills? And I thought lawyer, which is what my father-in-law at the time was. So that helped me crystallize it.
Okay. So with your first wife, did you meet her in school? Did you meet her at UT?
Oh my gosh. I don't even want to go there.
Well, you mentioned father-in-law.
Such bad memories. I mentioned father-in-law. I didn't say
after
my
getting
first
a law
wife's
degree.
father. You notice how I phrase that. I met her in a musical in 1983 called How to Succeed in Business Without Really Trying at the Zilker Park in Austin, Texas, an outdoor musical. It was done every year. I think it still is.
Robert Morse played it on the big screen.
Yes, he did. I think he reprised his role there from Broadway.
Okay. So your father-in-law then was a lawyer.
Yes.
And he gave
and you
you
thought
advice.
if he could be a lawyer, anybody could be a lawyer.
No, I did not think that at all. It was quite intimidating, believe me, to be a lawyer. I made the huge mistake after. I'm sorry?
What kind of lawyer was he?
Bank.
Bank.
He worked
Okay.
for a bank and at a bank building in a nice office on the 24th floor, I think it was, of maybe a 26th floor building
Wow.
in
So you're
downtown
saying it
Austin.
was very intimidating, but you thought, let me go this way.
Yes, I did. And then I made the huge mistake. I actually got accepted at UT, which was a top 10 law school at the time. I have no idea how I got in there because my LSAT scores were not incredibly good. LSAT, you know, the test you got to take,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
Right. There
And
was
then they
one
do it some
spot
kind of,
for a former dancer left on
yes,
the
yes. So in my application and my GPA, it was good, but it wasn't incredible. I mean, this is a top 10 law school. So I put that all together and I made sure I marked on there under ethnicity. I wrote in big letters, Mormon.
No.
Way. At the time, I was reading stuff, and you know, there were arguments going on about whether Mormonism had arrived at the point where it could be described as its own ethnicity. And I thought, I'm going to write it down. And I think that they let everybody in, like the 90% or however many they let in on academics, and then they've got like 10% for diversity. And I thought
Yeah.
they must have said, well, let's give the Mormon dance major a try.
So
somebody said, this will be
affirmation,
fun.
you are a story of affirmative action, affirmative action.
Yes.
You are a sitting example of
Yes.
that.
Mormonism and affirmative action is why I am what I am.
And dance major. The
And
diversity.
dance major.
The
Dance
diversity
major
of
too.
that.
You're right.
So
And I know, well, while Radio Free Mormon was at college, he actually heard about anti-Mormon lies, and he prepared some institute lessons, I believe, on defending the church.
Yeah. I actually heard about him when 1978 when I joined the church. You're not going to be a Mormon very long in a house with a J-dub before you start encountering some anti-Mormon literature. And I did. And, but what you're talking, so this is actually a decade later after I've gone through this stuff and read it and written about it and argued and all this kind of stuff. The Institute class, which was the spring of 1989 at the Institute building at the University of Texas at Austin, where I taught a self-styled course, 12 lessons on defending the faith.
wow. So you became an apologist.
Oh, yeah. With a
A
capital A.
trainer, an apologist trainer is what he was.
Wow.
And I recorded them all on tape, cassette tape, and 11 of the 12 survived. And I have taken those and put them up at Radio Free Mormon, and they have been received without a great deal of acclaim.
And so in a way, that helped you think about other deeper issues, and you were enamored by scholars and apologists, and you wanted to join their ranks.
Yes, I wanted to be fighting the good fight on the side of God,
And
who
so
apparently needs a lot of hacks to
you would
defend him.
submit papers, and you wanted to get published.
Yes.
Wow.
And in a way, that was training for you to be RFM.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Everything in my life has been training for me to be RFM, some things more than others. And that's certainly a big thing, Gene. I'm glad you brought it up. But yeah, I started writing because I'm reading all these papers. I'm a member of FARMS, right? Foundation for Ancient Research and Mormon Studies, John Welch's organization that he started in the late 70s, but I didn't find out about it until early 80s after I got back from my mission. And it was at that time a clearinghouse of scholarship on the Book of Mormon, where you could order papers that had been written about it, and they would just take care of copying it and sending it out for the price of copying and postage. So it was inexpensive, which was a good thing for a law student, and before that, a dance major such as myself, to be able to get this cheaply. And I was very, very interested, and that sparked in me a desire to start writing about things that I saw in the scripture. So I ended up ultimately, after a couple of failed attempts, being published in the Journal of Book of Mormon Studies in 1993, I think it was, and then again with a different paper in 1994. And then I was published in BYU Studies in 2006 and again in 2014.
Wow.
And I know that you've had different callings in the church, but you were gospel doctrine teacher.
Yes, for as long as they could
prior
stand.
to becoming Radio Free Mormon.
Yes, all that's true.
And that also helped you be Radio Free Mormon as well. And
oh yeah, from 2006 to 2010, I got to go through the entire cycle of the standard works. 2006, halfway through, I was called. It was the Old Testament at the time, and I used that opportunity to start familiarizing myself with non-Mormon academic scholarship about the scriptures, the Old Testament. That it moved into the New Testament, so I followed that in the next year. I got a bunch of tapes from the Learning Company featuring Bart Ehrman, which I was so impressed with that I started reading his books. And my class got a lot of information through me that was not from the manual. And that, of course, upset some people.
That's right.
Because it's not in the manual. Some people raise their hand. Where is this in the manual?
Sister
if it's
Johnson.
In the manual, why on earth would you want me to say it again? You know,
Sister
if it's
Johnson
there and
would
you
beat
can
a
read
path
it,
to
what
the
is
bishop.
the point? Yes, beating a path to the bishop. Look at Jean.
Yeah.
Jean, you're amazing. That's
Good.
right.
On it.
Sister Waters. That's her name.
Yeah, Sister
you know
Waters.
who you are. So,
so she got RFM fired.
Fortunately, I had some people who were on my side, by which I mean they appreciated the class, who were also present with the bishop and saying, hey, this guy's really doing stuff that nobody's done before, and people really appreciate it. So don't fire him right off the bat. And they didn't. They left me in there for 4 years. But I would spend 6 to 8 hours preparing for a gospel doctrine class. And I would start preparing the Sunday evening after church in advance of the next Sunday.
And what's interesting, it was all faith promoting. I mean, it was all faith promoting. It just wasn't correlated from the manual.
Yes. I mean, I certainly knew stuff that wasn't faith promoting, but I did not think it was my position is in Sunday school to be talking about things that were not faith promoting. That would seem strange. And so, yes, everything was faith promoting, or at least not faith damaging from my point of view. Right. And I remember that the goal that I set for myself was to make sure that everybody who came to my class learned at least one thing new.
That's right. If the gospel topics essays had been rolled out 5 years earlier, you might still be a gospel doctrine teacher, because then you wouldn't have been fired for saying things on the edge of anti-Mormon.
I don't know that I would have lasted that long anyway, but I do remember that the bishop in the ward, whose last name was Holbrook, I don't think you'll mind my mentioning it. He's a really good guy, very interested in scholarship, and he gave me an avenue between 2010 to 2014. 2010 is when I stopped teaching Sunday school. 2014 is when I stopped really attending church. So it was in those 4 years where I came up with the idea of doing a special, fireside is what they call them in the church, but a presentation. I think it was on Friday evenings, and it was maybe once a month about a particular subject. And he was always there. It was just a small group, maybe 10, 15 people at the most. It was in the Relief Society room. And I had given a presentation about the priesthood ban and things that had led up to it, and, all that kind of stuff. It was pretty in depth.
It was like a localized version of Know Your Religion.
Yes and no. Yes, it was localized, and yes, it was about knowing your religion. The only reason I say no is because I think that the Know Your Religion program does not live up to its name. Mm-hmm. I think it should be called Don't Know Your Religion.
Or know what we want you to know about your religion.
Yes. But I did talk about that, about the priesthood ban, in advance of December 2013, because I remember specifically in sacrament meeting, after the essay had come out, the bishop standing up in front of the entire congregation before sacrament meeting and announcing the fact this essay had come out, referencing the fact that I had given this 2-hour or so presentation that only 15 people had come to. And he said that the essay basically says that Radio Free Mormon was right.
Wow. He said that in front of the whole congregation.
Yes.
Wow. That's fantastic. How did you go from being the lawyer version of Hugh Nibley to RFM?
That is a long process, but let me just put it this way. All right. The thing about being an apologist, if you're going to be a good apologist and not just on the surface level, right?
Mm-hmm.
In history and everything, you have to learn all the arguments against the church in order to know the responses to those arguments. And whereas I would think 75% of these arguments, I've got good responses for, what I thought were good responses at the time, at least. There's another 25% that I don't. I have things that I can say, and I can hope that the other side doesn't know everything that I know, because if you know everything that I know, you're going to have some questions about it. I had questions about it. I didn't have a good answer that made sense to me. In fact, it looked kind of damaging. So I would focus on the other things.
You had to know when to hold them and know when to fold them.
Yeah. And ultimately, I folded them. But the whole thing is that I realized that it's not going from being an apologist to being RFM is not about doing a 180-degree turn. It might seem that way. But really what it is having all the information, knowing the information pretty much backward and forward, knowing the scriptures backward and forward. If that doesn't sound horrible, I'm sorry. Uzzah. And you can tell that story here in a second. But just looking at them just a little bit differently, it's like the parallax view. And if you look at a clock, like a standard kind of industrial clock, like they have in classrooms or other places, you know, the big circles stuck on the wall, where they have the hands out maybe half an inch from the surface. And if you look at it straight on, you can see that it's like, I don't know, let's say it's midnight, or noon, straight up, big hand and second hand. But if you, actually, that's a bad one. Let's make it 3 o'clock. So anyway, you look at 3 o'clock and it's straight up 3 o'clock. But if you go to the left side of it, if you move over here now, and you're just looking at a bit of a different angle, you're not turned your back to it and looking at the other wall. You just look at a bit of an angle. Now it's like 2 minutes or 3 minutes past 3.
Got it.
Or if you go to the other side, it's 3 minutes before 3.
Time travel.
And and that's all it takes. That's all it took for me. I knew all of the information. All I had to do was allow for the possibility that the Mormon church might not be what it claims to be. And then all of a sudden my vision got a lot better.
It's very interesting to put it that way, because I do believe at some point, right, you get to a point where you say, am I going to look from the side, or am I going to continue to look straight forward? And you got to the point where you said truth and honesty is more important than my disillusionment. That's what it sounds like, because I do feel as though most apologists, especially nowadays, they know there's certain things that they're not telling the truth about, or they're kind of tweaking, but you get to a point where you say, okay, am I going to follow the truth? Am I going to follow it this way to see it from the side? Or am I just going to put blinders on and keep looking forward and say it's 3 o'clock? And you just got to a point where you said, I can no longer just look at it and say it's 3 o'clock. I need to look to the side a bit. Did I take that analogy too far? Or
no, I think you're doing great. Or you could just do that instead of closing your eyes. Yeah, I tell you, I'm trying to recapture the thought that I had, and it went like that.
I just think of apologists like John Gee. I mean, I didn't want to name people, but I think of people like him with the Book of Abraham. And at some point, okay, yeah. I wanted to keep talking until it came back for you. So
thank you. There's a huge silence there. Anybody could have filled it, but no. So, no, the thought that I had, and hopefully it'll come back to me again, was that no, at some point, I got to the stage where I trusted myself enough to reach my own conclusions without having them dictated to me.
I think of that as like giving yourself permission to think for yourself.
Yes.
Instead of thinking the way the church wants you to think.
Because growing up as a Mormon from age 18 when I joined, but becoming a Mormon and developing as a Mormon, what I came to do was I knew what the truth was, because the truth is what I was told by the authorities of the church. And the truth is what I read in the scriptures as interpreted by the authorities in the church. And if there is a disconnect between what I'm thinking or the conclusions I'm reaching or the way things look to me versus what the authorities tell me, I would say, okay, well, the problem's with me. I'm the one who's not thinking this through correctly. And I'm coming, and if I'm thinking it looks weird, well, maybe it does, but that's my problem. That's my fault. So if the church inculcates doubt in its members, not doubt in the church, but doubt in themselves. That's the doubt that the members of the church want, that the leaders of the church want the members to have. This is a new idea, so forgive me that I'm fumbling with it.
No, it makes sense. Makes perfect sense.
They don't want you to doubt the church. They don't want you to doubt them, but they do want you to doubt yourself, because at some point, if you are thinking about things, if you're studying about things, you're going to have a disconnect where what you're thinking is different than what you're being told to think. And as long as you are willing to continue to say, okay, I'm going to doubt myself, I'm going to doubt myself, I'm going to doubt myself, then you can continue, or I could have continued to remain a member for the rest of my life. But it was when I started thinking, well, I really think that it's this way, regardless of what I'm being told. And part of that is I had to get into my 40s and 50s and start getting enough experience and enough education and enough Shakespeare and world literature and Bible studies and Book of Mormon studies and church history studies to the point where I stopped seeing the authorities of the church the way they want me to see them, because I began seeing that they really had much less of a knowledge base than I had managed to accumulate for myself.
You became an independent thinker.
I did. And they do not want independent thinkers in this church. No. That's like Julius Caesar, right? Remember what he says to Mark Antony about Cassius? Jan Cassius has a lean and hungry look.
Yes.
He thinks too much.
Yes.
Such men are dangerous.
Yes. He thinks too much.
Is this sort of when consigliere was born?
Consigliere was a screen name of mine at a message board. When on earth did that start? I have no idea anymore. But it was a long time ago. But he was still very much, he had questions, but he also was very much an apologist for the church. And he would put out his Book of Mormon bullseyes. And but eventually consigliere came around to understanding that the bullseyes were not as on target as maybe he had thought.
Carrie Schertz, the backyard professor, credits consigliere for helping him along his path and encouraging him to become a podcaster for re-entering the podcasting field.
Oh, good Lord. Now I know how Victor von Frankenstein felt.
You've created a monster.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so you end up corresponding with Bill Reel. And
actually, he got a hold of me.
He got a hold of you.
He got a hold of me.
And
I'm not a kind of person who's really going to reach out to people that I see as famous. I would see myself as being a bother.
You're not a groupie like I am.
I might be a groupie, but I'm not going to impose myself on them, generally speaking, right? So anyway, I was doing this blog, right, at Rational Faiths from around 2012 to 2015. Are you familiar with that, Gene?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I had done that. It's like every 3 weeks or so. And that's what really gave me my voice.
Mm-hmm.
What really gave me my voice was writing this blog. And I'm very grateful to the owners of that blog for inviting me to do it, because they have this blog with various people contributing. Rational Faiths, I think it's still going. I haven't been there for a while. But they wanted someone to present the faithful side of Book of Mormon bullseyes. Is Mike Barker. That was the owner, the proprietor. And he reached out to me and asked me, because all they have is people being critical of the church. He says, would you write some articles or something favorable, so we have a balance here. And I said, sure, I will. So I wrote a 2-part blog about the Book of Mormon and all the bullseyes in the Book of Mormon. And one of the people who was reading it and making comments asked if I would try and do the other side. Okay, so now you've given us the reasons for the Book of Mormon being true. Can you give us a blog on the other side of that? I thought, well, that makes sense. Okay, I'll give it a try. I'm a lawyer. I'm used to arguing both sides of the same position. So I thought, okay, what is the biggest bullseye that the Book of Mormon is not true? By which I mean not historical. And I knew what it was. It was the thing that I'd always had trouble with and read refutations to, including Hugh Nibley, which I found unpersuasive, but continued to think, oh, well, he's smarter than I am, so it must be a good argument. I'm the one who's not getting this. And it's, of course, King James Version in the Book of Mormon. Mm-hmm. And I wrote a blog about it. And all I did was use the information that I already knew. I'm sure I did a little additional research to find where these things were, but boom. Once I allowed myself to think about it and to write about it and to express it, I realized this was the smoking gun.
Wow.
When it comes to the Book of Mormon.
Like, consider the possibility that the opposite is true. And you did. Yeah. You considered it.
And I knew all the information. I just hadn't allowed myself to correlate it. Pardon the expression. What is it? That's H.P. Lovecraft, isn't it? One of my favorite quotes from H.P. Lovecraft, where he says that the greatest mercy in the universe is the inability of the human mind to correlate all its contents.
Oh, I've never heard that.
Yeah, I don't know if it's true because obviously we can't correlate them all. But the more we correlate, the more I correlated, the more it helped me to see, you've put decades into this. You went on a mission, untold amounts of tithing, sacrifice, the whole 9 yards that comes from being a faithful Mormon. And I realized that I felt that I did not need or want to continue in activity with the LDS Church. I didn't want at the end of my life to be like the famous guy who climbs to the top of the ladder, spends his life climbing to the top of the ladder only to find out was leaning against the wrong tree.
Yeah.
So Bill sought you out, and what did he have to say to you?
Because I wrote a blog about the Adam God theory. And I knew a lot of stuff about the Adam God theory because I had made it a special point of study on my mission, after my mission, during the 1980s and very early 90s. And so I had written a blog about it. And because the church was busy. Well, first off, the church tries to hide that. We know that. And the second thing is that then they had come out with their manual under the teachings of the leaders, presidents of the church, right? They got into Brigham Young. So I'm looking at this and I'm going, you have got to be kidding me. Because of course it's topical, right? You got enough lessons to cover a year and they're just going to go over the same lessons you go over every year. But we'll look at Brigham Young and we'll collect different things he said and put them in the same subjects and the same chapters, right? So of course they're going to have something about God. I mean, right?
But
and
they
did. Yeah, and they did because,
they
about
did,
God.
but it was very
featuring a lot of ellipses.
No, they were even dirtier than that. I think they abandoned the ellipses in a lot of cases. And what they did was, they may have used some ellipses. But what I thought when I started reading it was, how are they going to come up with statements by Brigham Young about God that are not talking about Adam being God? Because it seemed to me like I don't know everything that Brigham Young ever said or wrote, probably the minority of it. But from what I had seen, it looked like anytime he talked about God, he's talking about Adam being God. So I was interested in how they were going to approach this. And I was shocked to find out that what they did was, in order to make Brigham Young teach current teaching about God and Adam, they had to selectively quote him. They had to actually carve out a piece here and a piece here and leave out the part in the middle where he says, "Now hear it, O inhabitants of the earth. Adam is our father and our God and the only God with whom we have to do." And they were willing to do that without telling their readers.
The correlated version of Brigham Young.
Yes. So now Brigham Young is indistinguishable from Spencer Kimball or anybody else in the latter part of the 20th century, or now the early part of the 21st century, teaching regular stuff that Mormons teach about God. So I wrote this thing up. Anyway, sorry. I get a call, I think. Somehow Bill Brill reaches out to me. And I'd been listening to his show, Mormon Discussions.
Mhm.
I've been listening to his show. It was very meaningful to me, especially his Stages of Faith, which he continued to revisit. And I kept listening to them because it was very meaningful to me that I'm not the only person going through this. You mean this is something?
Where was Bill? I'm sorry, where was Bill? I want to know, where was Bill in his faith journey when, at this point, when he reaches out to you?
Well, it would have been 2016.
Okay.
When he reached out to me. So I'm not exactly sure, but I mean, he's definitely deconstructing.
Right.
He's definitely deconstructing. He's talking about stages of faith. And so I was very honored. He reached out. He said, "Hey, I read your blog about Adam God. I've never talked about Adam God on the podcast. I'd love to have you come on." I said, "Just name the time and the day. I'll be there." And we did a podcast. I think it went out in August, I think it was, of 2016. And it was very popular. A lot of people liked it. And so he reached out to me again after that and asked me if I wanted to do my own podcast. And I said, sure, I've got a name already. And I've had a name for several years. I just don't know the first thing about podcasting. He said, "What's the name?" I said, Radio Free Mormon. He said, "Oh, I like that name. That's a cool name." I said, "Thank you." So I got the hard thing done. Now we just got to learn how to podcast. And he helped me through that. It was very difficult for me to learn the technical stuff. But once I've got it down, I got a little bit better. And practice has helped.
And he showed you how to edit because you were frustrated that you were going on and you couldn't figure out how to make this a presentable thing.
Yeah.
And he said, "Well, you edit it." And so then you edit it so that your very first episode removed all the breaths. So everything was just on one breath.
I must have made 1,000 edits in that first episode. It's difficult to listen to. I'm just thinking this morning, because I was thinking about, I looked it up. So that's how I knew it was October 23rd, 2016, when the first one went up of Radio Free Mormon, that maybe I should go back to that and present that material again in a new, updated, better equipment visual format. But maybe I will. I don't have time for it. By the way, I'm going to break the news for you today, okay, Summer? Okay, Jane?
Breaking news.
Breaking news. I am planning and I'm committing to not just one new podcast starting in 2024, but 2 new podcasts. First one's going to be following the Come Follow Me manual. The working title is Radio Free Come Follow Me. And so having a weekly episode covering the materials 1 week in advance of the lesson in church. So if you have any interest in hearing Radio Free Mormon talk about the materials that are going to be talked about in church the following Sunday in Sunday school, then this will be your place where you can go. And I think that this will also allow me to come up with a great deal of material that I've never presented before, just because, I mean, it's like there's all these different things out there, right? There's a whole sky of stars, and there's a whole lifetime of incidents relating to Mormonism or realizations or experiences or whatever. And I think both of you probably know what I'm talking about. But when it comes to doing a podcast, I have to try and have a message, right? There's got to be a point and a theme, and I can only use certain things, which means that all these other things never get tapped. So hopefully by doing it this way, and this would be a 4-year project, obviously, since you go through the 4 standard works. Well, you go through Old Testament, New Testament, Book of Mormon, and church history.
Right.
Okay. You make your way through the 4 standard works in the 4 years. That I'm excited about that. I think it'd be very interesting for me, hopefully for the audience, whether they go to church still or not. And the second podcast, which I want to premiere in January, is Brush Up Your Shakespeare.
Oh my gosh, it's so fantastic.
Thank you. Here's
Both.
my idea. Okay, you ready? It's going to be really short, no more than 15 minutes, hopefully 10 minutes. And the idea is going to be, because I think everybody knows that Shakespeare is important. All right. It's like all Mormons know they're supposed to read Isaiah, but nobody's going to do it. It's just too intimidating. And you just can't, you need an in, right?
Mhm.
Some way to get in to this. And that's what I want this podcast to be. And I don't want it to be on a high level. I want it to be on a Radio Free Mormon level where we talk about one line each episode. And maybe you can come away knowing that line, knowing how it was used in a play, and being able to know how you could use it in your own life. And
Oh
that
my
way,
gosh.
you don't actually have to read all of Shakespeare. You don't have to watch Shakespeare. You could have these lines. And if you know where they come from, you could just insert them in the conversation and look smart as F. And
That is fantastic.
you think that's a
Wow.
good idea?
It'll
I
be almost
love it.
Now, you want to know what the secret is? Okay, here's the secret. The secret is my plan is to go through the plays, starting with Hamlet probably, and get a line maybe out of each act or so that we talk about for 10 minutes. So while we're talking about just this one line to help you cheat on learning Shakespeare, you're actually going to be learning the plays as well. That's what I hope to be able
Love
to
that.
accomplish. I shouldn't have said that out loud. I feel like Hagrid right now.
what is the point underneath a thing, a fulcrum?
Mhm.
So you're going to use that one line as like a fulcrum to balance the whole writing on.
Well, yeah. And, with Hamlet, it's very easy because Hamlet has so many famous sayings in it. And a lot of them people know, a lot of them people don't know. My favorite story, which I heard from Isaac Asimov, not directly, but from a preface to a book he wrote about Shakespeare's plays, was of the elderly woman who had never once in her life read Hamlet and figured, before I shuffle off this mortal coil, I should probably get around to it and read Hamlet. And she tells her friend, I'm going to read Hamlet. So a couple months goes by and they're having tea or whatever. And the friend says, so did you get around to reading Hamlet finally? And she goes, yes, I did. And the friend says, what did you think of it? And this lady says, well, it wasn't really that great. All it was a bunch of famous quotes strung together.
Wow. Wow.
All I know it's about a guy talking to a skull.
Alas, poor Yorick. I knew him, Horatio, a fellow of
Yeah.
infinite jest.
I absolutely love both ideas, and I'm gonna say why really quickly. Next year we go back to Book of Mormon for Come Follow Me, and for a lot of people who are deconstructing but still turn church, possibly, I think that it is it might be a difficult year. We had Old Testament, New Testament. You can kind of still enjoy those works. But with Book of Mormon, when you're deconstructing and you are either wondering if it's true or you've come to the point where you say it's not, it's a little bit hard to figure it all out. So I think it is fantastic to have a radio-free Come Follow Me where you pinpoint and kind of put evidence and also just deconstruct in your own way the Come Follow Me ahead of time so that you can have both sides for those that still go to church and for those
It's
that
like
don't. It'll just be fun.
Like a thinking man's version of Don't Miss This.
Exactly. I like that, Gene. Yes.
Just Radio Free Mormon, no, don't miss this.
I was hoping you wouldn't ask me that.
So, and that's okay, because Don't Miss This's former co-host is now a church general authority.
Yes. Release.
Don't miss this. Don't miss what? What is that?
That could be the path for you now.
So
they go over the lessons. They go over the lessons weekly.
You mean like Now You Know, or something different? It's a church produced.
Yes. Not really, but it's
like independent, but TBM.
Okay. So
So
don't miss this in
so
Sunday school.
it's
Yeah,
Emily.
yeah.
It's Emily Freeman, and who is the other one? It's two of them, and they got together and they
And they have
did a
great
production.
personalities and a
I
pretty
used to
good
follow them all
production.
the time. Yes, and they break down the
They use
lesson
a whiteboard
before.
and they do it like they're teaching a Sunday school class.
Yes. And
And
they
they have
break
good
down the
rapport.
lesson beforehand. They have a lesson before the week's lesson. And so you're able to go into it. So you are kind of the don't miss this on this side.
There are actually several of those, I think, that are out there that
Yeah.
Latter-day Saints are putting up about come follow me. There's two
I have
guys in
been-
white shirts. I've never watched it, but they have like a little gem in the bottom left corner with a number. I don't know, on the thumbnail. So
I have been praying for something like this, actually.
well, you have prayed me here.
That's right.
I
So what do I want with you?
I follow your general conference wrap up. So I think that this is along those lines. I think it's just it's something that's very needed. With Shakespeare, that is a phenomenal idea. And I can't believe no one has thought of it before you.
Maybe they
because
have. I'm not aware of what's out there really,
I
except for one
haven't
podcast
seen-
that I'm sorry, go ahead, Summer.
No. I just said I haven't seen it if it is
Okay,
out
well,
there.
good. I hope that I'm creating a niche, as they say in England, or a niche, as we say here. I hope so. I hope it's not something that's already been filled, because then I've got to do it better, right? Or at least different or something. But there was one guy who was Aaron Ziegler. I remember his name, Aaron Ziegler, Chop Bard. And he was going through the plays. He may still be. And I just love the way he goes through the plays. It's been a while since I listened. Sorry, Aaron. It's a wonderful podcast, and I recommend it to people. But he's going through the plays, and he's basically like, he got to the point where he's pretty much reading every scene, every line, and then talking about it. And I think that a lot of people want to be able to get in easier than that. And starting, a little more than kin and less than kind. What that means. There needs no ghost, my Lord, come from the grave to tell us this. All those kinds of things. I see nothing, yet all there is I see.
Going back, so you do your first episode, you put it out there. It's audio. You choose to do the audio format. It goes on.
Oh, you're using present tense for 2016.
Yeah, you go back to 2016 right now, and you are you put it out there. What do you do? Do you click somewhere to see how many people are viewing it, or do you just let it go and let Bill tell you how good it's doing? What were you thinking?
I typically sit at my desk and click repeat to increase the number of views. No,
that's right. Call your friends. Hey,
seriously though, Bill is the keeper of the information. I work for him. And that's a strange thing sometimes for people to realize. I know Bill was talking about it when we were doing our 3rd anniversary at Mormonism Live. He may have even said it on the air. I can't remember, but he got a bit emotional at the end. So did I. But I think I started it. And but he's talking about, we are friends and we are co-workers, and we're very, very equal in the way we talk and about ideas for this and that. But on the other hand, he's my boss.
It's like the Godhead. Sure, Jesus, you're Jesus, but I'm your father.
Very good.
Yeah. So having said, why was I saying that? Because you had asked something about
right after
he's the keeper of the information. He knows all this stuff. Maybe there's a way for me to access it. I don't know. I don't bother with it too much. I remember I used to call him and say, hey, how many views is that up to? But I don't really do that anymore. Now that it's on YouTube, I can actually just look, and it has the number right there. So I don't have to bother him as much.
And then after you had done a few shows, was there one episode that he said, wow, this episode is like going viral?
Yes.
Was there any? Which one was that? Do you remember?
Wrong Roads.
Wrong Roads.
He really liked Wrong Roads. And Wrong Roads was good, but it's like it wrote itself. Yeah. Right? This is about Elder Holland's story.
Yeah.
Right.
And for those of you who don't know, it's very early on. I mean, it's probably 2017. But he's with his son. He gets lost in the desert. Night is falling. and there's 2 roads, and they have no idea where they are. And so Elder Holland stops and he says, okay, well, let's pray about it. And the kid prays about it, and Elder Holland prays about it. And I think, I can't remember who said, let's go. I think we should go down the right road. And the kid says, yeah, I got that impression too, or vice versa. Anyway, they both get the same impression. They go down the left or the right, whichever one it was. It changes depending upon which one you're asking in their talks. However, let's just say right road. So they drive down this right road, and this is like a track in the desert. It's not a paved road or anything.
Right.
So they drive down this for a few hundred yards, and it dead ends. They realize, well, this was the wrong road, right? So then they immediately turn around, go back to the place where and then they take the other road. And then they find out that this one leads them to where they're going, and they're coming to the lights of the city. And that's the faith promoting story.
That's
because
the story.
his kid, who's now either, I think he's a GA now, Holland, or a president of some college. It's funny how that works.
Right. Mm-hmm.
He last name Holland.
Look it up.
He's saying, hey, Dad. Yeah, what is it, son? Well, you know, back at that fork at the road where we prayed and we had this, we thought we should go down this, and it was the wrong answer. And Elder Holland has to come up with an explanation for this. And the best he can do is to say, well, I think what happened, son, is that the Holy Ghost sent us down the wrong road so that we would know that when we turned around and got back on the other road, that it was really the right road.
That's right. It's almost akin to having the faith not to be healed.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes. It might have been the start of it. And I was just left flummoxed. This is such a bad story, Elder Holland. Why are you even mentioning it publicly, much less having a seminary video made out of it? Because this doesn't sound like something that can really be relied upon. If it can't tell you what direction to go, I mean, it's a binary freaking choice. It's a coin toss. If the Holy Ghost can't give you the right answer in a coin toss scenario, why are we relying on it to tell us whether you're an apostle and the Book of Mormon is true and Mormonism is God's true church?
Or even worse, it gives you the answer, but it's the wrong answer.
Right.
So not even that the Holy Ghost doesn't give you an answer, it prompts you to do for the wrong answer. But
isn't that how apostles are called? Don't you cast lots, and then whichever way the lots fall is the next apostle?
Oh, I don't.
So God is in flipping the coin or casting the lots. That's how you receive God's will.
Well, I expect you're referencing Acts chapter 1, where they had to choose the apostle to take the place of Judas, who fell. And they went between Matthias and, was it just, I can't remember the other guy who didn't get it. But nowadays, no, there's no lots involved because we don't use dice in the LDS church anymore. They just go straight for the guy who's the oldest.
No playing cards, no dice.
Yes. Summur, about Uzzah.
Yes. I was wondering how you're going to bring that back around.
Well, it wasn't through any kind of artful segue. I just thought I would just say, what about Uzzah?
So we were discussing yesterday the story, which, Gene, I'm curious to know if you've heard of it, the Ark of the Covenant, when they are transporting it, correct? RFM? Mm-hmm. They're transporting it. I don't remember where they were taking
up a hill.
And the soldier reaches out. There you go, Gene. That's what we were discussing. And how he dies just like that because, he needs to be punished for touching the ark.
Mm-hmm. And that's what happens to apologists when they try to hold up the church.
Yeah. Right. So that's what we were discussing yesterday. When you question the authority of the church, are you trying to study the ark?
Right. And Summur had brought up the story in a way, wondering if I had heard it. And I just said, Uzzah. And I don't think she heard me. She kept talking. And I said, yes, Uzzah. And she goes, what are you saying? It's like,
that's how the unfortunate person he knows about it.
Study the ark. And she says, how do you know that? And I said, that's why I'm Radio Free Mormon.
That's a true story loosely based on actual events.
By the way, the clicking you heard was me double checking that now. And yeah, it's Uzzah. Uzzah, just the way I spelled it for you yesterday.
That's
Yeah,
right.
we had mentioned that story, my husband and I, to the bishop, and the bishop actually was not aware of the story. He said, I don't remember that one. And so when I mentioned it to RFM yesterday, I said, have you heard of this story? And he said, let me do you one better. I will tell you the name in the
Did I
story.
say that?
I mean,
I
based
hope
on
I wasn't that
loosely based on, no, you
officious.
didn't say it that way. You didn't say it that way. But I was very impressed. Said, wow.
Thank
Right.
you. If I had been your dad or you talking to your bishop, I would have, what was it, said what Dan Aykroyd said to Bill Murray in Ghostbusters. You never studied.
Never studied. Yep. My favorite line is, no human could stack books like this.
Yes, that's
Which
a
I think you
great line.
referenced in your anniversary special. I think
Yeah,
that came
that's
up.
a great line. Oh my gosh.
It is a great
By the
line.
way, I came to a point, and this is a number of years ago, and it's through study. It's not me, but through study and reading and thinking about things related to the scriptures. The story about the steadying of the ark
Mm.
is significant, not because that's what really happened, because that never happened. Come on. Or even if it did, something like it. Okay. The significance of it is, why does this story appear in the scriptures? Who wants that story to be told? And what interests does it serve?
And Dan McClellan will say that everything is for the people of that time. Nothing is for the future. They didn't see 2,000 years in the future. So what you have to figure out, who at the time it appeared were they talking to?
Yeah, and obviously it's from a priestly class that
Right.
doesn't want anybody mucking with their priestly duties. That's a strong boundary marker story. If you don't have the priesthood, if you're not a Aaronic priest or a Levite or whatever it was they had back then, don't be messing with it. Even
Don't
if,
study the ark.
yes, we'll put it in the
Don't
most
touch my ark,
extreme,
baby.
we'll put it in the most extreme terms we possibly can
So interesting.
with the ark, because you don't get to carry the ark. That's the job of the priesthood. That's the Levites. They're the only ones who get to carry the ark. And so for a non-Levite to touch the ark
Mhm.
is death, even if they're doing it for the best possible reason.
Even with the
So,
best intentions.
yeah. So I think that would obviously come from probably the P source.
Yeah.
But then you have to couple that with, what churches tell that story today? I can't
Authoritarian.
speak for other churches, but I can tell you why the LDS church teaches that story today. And that's because of the same reason. They're very jealous of their priesthood power and authority, and they don't want anybody else even thinking about messing with it.
It's the gospel of obedience.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, it's one of those stories that it's a hard one if you think it's literal, you
Mm-hmm.
think, what kind of God would do this? It's a little extreme.
Mm-hmm.
Pillar of salt as well, right? Turn around,
Mm-hmm.
pillar of salt. What kind of God does this? But when you think of it in the sense of who would want this story to be told, that makes so much
Context.
sense. So much
Oh,
sense.
great. I think the God who would turn Lot's wife into a pillar of salt was probably a horse lover.
Or a restaurateur.
Just turn her into a big lick block.
Yeah. So anyway, yes, that was the whole point of the
It's
steadying
a
of the
salt
ark.
block. They lick it, but it's a salt block. Sorry.
Right.
So pillar of salt. The horse isn't going to
That's right.
complain.
No, not at all.
So
But were horses in existence in
There they were.
Middle
they were there.
Middle East?
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely they were. They pulled chariots there.
That's
Unlike
right.
the chariots that they had that are mentioned in the Book of Mormon, which nothing pulled apparently.
Right. All the wars.
That's right.
But RFM, are there any podcasts that you have done that you actually do revisit multiple times, like Jean does, that you just enjoyed doing, or the information? Is there any that are your favorite I don't know if you re-listen to them, but any ones that you've done that are your favorite?
There have been times when I've re-listened, but usually it's to refresh my recollection about something that's coming up.
Got it.
Having
prep.
said that, I will tell you that there are times when I listen to myself from several years ago,
Mhm.
and I'm quite astonished by the fact that I hear myself pursuing a certain line of thought, which then triggers an idea in my head while I'm listening about something else to mention that connects to it in a really clever way, of course. And then I hear myself years ago making that same connection in the brain and saying exactly that same thing, often using the exact same words.
Wow. That's quite interesting. I'm going to say that one of the, there's been so many podcasts that you guys have done that's had an impact on me, but one of them as well was the Mark Hoffman one that you guys did, the breaking down of that. I watched Murder Among Mormons first, and there was a lot of things that stood out to me, but I'd actually never heard of the Salamander Letter. My husband on his mission, he served in the Bible Belt, so he had heard about it.
Among the
But
Baptists.
among the Baptists, they always come up. But I had never heard of it on the East Coast ever. And so it was very interesting to watch that episode. I thought it was amazingly done. Netflix did it. But then to hear your breakdown, you and Bill's breakdown of it was phenomenal. So that's an episode I visit often. And I told you the Oedipus, the Greek tragedy, one was a fantastic one too.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. You know, the big thing I learned from Murder Among the Mormons that had really never occurred to me before was when they're talking about the experts in document analysis to determine if they're forgeries or whether they're authentic.
Mm-hmm.
Just needs to be one thing.
Yes. Oh, that's what you got. One thing. Yes.
Yep.
Is that I had approached the Book of Mormon from my bullseye days as if it's a balancing test, because I knew there were negative things about the Book of Mormon. Sure, there's anachronisms, but look at all this cool stuff that connects.
And you're a lawyer, the preponderance of evidence, right?
That's how I was looking at it. And of course, I'm looking much more at the stuff that favors my view than the other stuff, which is just kind of an annoyance. And I'm aware it's out there, but I don't want to really look at it, because if you look at it too much, it might, come after you and attack you and tear you apart. So you got to leave that alone.
Right.
But I realized then, because the expert said it, that when he's looking at a document to determine if it's a forgery, all he needs is one anachronism.
Yeah.
I think it just focused on my finger. Let me bring that down. There we go. Because if there's one anachronism, it doesn't make any difference how good the rest of the forgery is, how accurate it might look, what paper it's written on, the ink, the incredible connections that nobody should know. If there's one anachronism, it means the entire thing is a forgery.
Mm-hmm.
And I just went,
Whoa.
Book of Mormon, you're out of here. It's not a balancing test. It only takes one. Very good memory, Jane.
And what stood out to me, which, I mean, it's been said over and over, was the discernment, the spirit of discernment, to see that picture. Again, I'd never heard the story. I'd never saw that picture before, but to see that picture of the authorities around this Mark Hoffman, this murderer, and they're just, nothing is being felt or known or prompted. To me, that stood out. I said, wait, this isn't. And then, of course, to hear Elder Oaks later talk about salamanders and being very lawyerly and explaining that. So anyway, I appreciate that episode. And if you ever want to do the Oedipus episode again, go for it.
And this was another thing, because you'd mentioned this. I thought that I had not done an episode on Oedipus, or that I had mentioned it in a group setting, that the recording was not usable. And so I had never produced it.
Mm-hmm.
And then Summer's going, no, I heard it. And I said, well, were you at this place where I spoke about it? No. And then, it's like 5 minutes later, she sends me a text with a link to the show where I talked about it. Of course, it was about something else too, wasn't it? Something and Oedipus Rex. There was something first. I can't remember it.
Oh, it was the
And I saw it yesterday.
under Banner of Heaven and the Greek tragedy.
Right. That's
Yes.
exactly it, because that was such a connection between the character played by Spider-Man, Andrew Garfield,
Yes.
Detective Pyrie,
Yes.
and his struggle. I mean, it was so on point with Oedipus Rex, because Detective Pyrie, the faithful Mormon, the believing Mormon, who's starting to learn things about his religion that have the potential of destroying his world,
Mm-hmm.
his family, his marriage, his friendships, everything. And the question that has to come in every person's life at that point, if you're ever in a point like this,
Right.
and I think if you live to any kind of age, you're going to have a time like this, at least one, where what you have come to accept and built your life around becomes challenged by some outside information that you were not anticipating, and you weren't looking for it even, but it comes before you. And what do you do with it? Do you take that and do you just ignore it and proceed as usual? Or do you say, this is troublesome, I'm going to have to pursue this to find out where it leads? And then, like Oedipus, you keep pursuing it and pursuing it and pursuing it, even though you start, because somewhere along this trajectory, you realize that if this is true, it's going to destroy your world, upturn it, whatever. Do you continue to follow it to find out what the truth is, in spite of the ramifications it will have on you? And Detective Pyrie does,
Yes.
and Oedipus does too. And the only difference is that at the end of Banner of Heaven, Andrew Garfield doesn't poke his eyes out with knitting needles or whatever it was.
It was a better ending for him.
Yes. He didn't wander around blind for the rest of his life.
And I suppose the opposite of that is when people don't want to hear anymore because they fear where it might lead to.
Right. And I think that we all have to understand that is part of the human condition. And so, at least for me, I've got to make allowances. I mean, that's me. That was me. That was I. I know. Sorry, Mom. But that was who I was.
I was me.
Right? Were you?
I was me once.
I used to be you. That was the fun part.
Yeah.
But so I have to make allowance for that and recognize that just because somebody is that way now, I have to remember that's how I was too. And it's perhaps one of the, if not the hardest thing in the world to do.
Yeah. And you have to get to a point where truth and knowing what is right and knowing what is true trumps whatever you're holding on to, whether it's your identity, whether it's whatever. And that's what happened with Oedipus. And we were talking, Jean, yesterday about Oedipus's wife / mom and how she kept saying, no, don't go down this road. Please stop. And that's a lot of family members of the church that say, I don't want to hear anymore. I don't want you to go down this road anymore. Let's just stay over here and continue to be married. I don't want to know. But Oedipus said, no, I need to know the truth no matter where this takes us. And it took him to...
It's kind of brave in a way.
Absolutely.
The bravest thing. That's what makes him a hero. A tragic hero, but a hero nonetheless. And Yocasta, his mom / wife / lover.
Yeah.
She knows it as well as he does. I mean, the writing is on the wall at this point. They just haven't put the final, touches
connecting the dots.
She knows exactly where this is leading, and she doesn't want to go there. She tells him, don't do it, because she would be okay at that point in her life. She's a literary figure, but she would be okay at that point in the play with just leaving it alone, knowing that that's what happened, but not being completely proven beyond a reason, beyond any doubt, which is what he's aiming for. And he's almost there. Let's knock it off. Let's stop it. Let's just live the rest of our life together and ignore the reality that's hovering over us for the rest of our lives. Yeah, there's still a chance.
Still a chance.
We might, that I might not be your mom.
That's right. Don't give me the results of the DNA test.
Yeah. Yeah, don't bring in the shepherd. We don't need to talk to him. We don't need to know who he is.
Right. The shepherd.
Yeah. So if you ever want to do that podcast again, I, for one, would be okay with that. Our friend was talking yesterday
Thank
about
you so
how we
much.
might redo it. So,
Sure.
but it's one worth doing. So,
Thank you. Because, great literature, as I found out when I started studying it at the age of 49, great literature is great for a reason. And it's because it speaks to the human condition and often in its extreme manifestations. And so it speaks to me, it speaks to basically all of us because we're all part of humanity. And that's, but when it comes to Mormonism, Oedipus Rex and his search for truth really resonated with me. And that's why I wanted to do a show on it.
That's right. And in a way, it's a prophetic command to seek out the best books of the world.
Sort of. Section 88, right?
yeah. I
Seek
will
out of the
say,
best books.
I will say that that's why I'm excited about the Shakespeare podcast that you're doing as well. I think that just like Oedipus, there's going to be a lot that people can bring to whatever Shakespeare you bring into their lives. And there might be a Mormonism connection there as well with a lot of those books and stories.
There will be, but that's the challenge. Do I want to make this Mormon centric or do I want to make it non-Mormon and therefore open to a wider audience?
I would make it non-Mormon, but I think that people will bring it in. I just think it's one of those natural things that people will start to say, wait a minute, I see that connection. And maybe you bring up that connection one episode or a couple episodes, but it won't be Mormon centric. That would be my thoughts on that.
Hugh Nibley read a lot of Shakespeare, but the two quotes he always used in his class, what was it, his honors class, Pearl of Great Price, because he would say it over and over. I wasn't there. I listened to it. I ordered it and then got the transcripts, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, first one was, there needs no ghost, my Lord, come from the grave to tell us this. Which is just a nice Shakespeare way of saying, duh.
Yeah.
We don't need a ghost to tell us this because everybody knows this, right? So there needs no ghost, my Lord, come from the grave to tell us this. And then later on in Gertrude's, the Queen's chamber, the chamber scene, where the ghost appears to Hamlet and says, knock it off with your mother, right? Quit accusing her because he's trying to get her to confess to being in on his father's murder.
Yes.
Because he suspects her. And the ghost appears. This is where, leave her to heaven. Leave her to heaven, I think is the line. But anyway, this is where Hamlet sees the ghost and can hear the ghost. His mom can't. She can't see the ghost there.
Yeah.
That would have been very interesting psychologically for us to wonder if it was only in Hamlet's mind that he saw the ghost, except for the fact that in Act 1, we know that other people have seen the ghost. In fact, they see him before Hamlet, right?
Right.
So we know that the ghost is a real entity within the play. So for some reason, Gertrude can't see him. But Gertrude says the line, because Hamlet's saying, can't you see, your husband, my father, standing right there? And she says, I see nothing, yet all there is, I see.
Martin Harris saw the ghost, but it was in the form of a deer.
Yes, or a sleek-haired fellow with the head of a jackass and 4 feet. The devil. He saw that too, I think. Right? So, yeah. And that's the human condition. We think we see everything.
But we see
even if there's something right in front of our face that somebody else can see who has a different vision or a different way of seeing or for whatever reason. But we tend to think because we see everything, then there's nothing beyond what we see. And I guess that gets paired up really with a very famous quote from Horatio or from Hamlet, more things in heaven and earth than are dreamt of in your philosophy, Horatio.
Right.
Well, now we've got off into Shakespeare. Let's get off. We'll come back.
Well, there you go.
We're at 1 hour and 41 minutes.
That's right. We're going to trim it down to like 7 minutes, I think.
I hope so. Hopefully it'll be the part where I'm not talking.
So anyway, thanks Radio Free Mormon for joining us. It's been great. We discovered how Radio Free Mormon became Radio Free Mormon. So,
yes. And he's still becoming.
You go. and he's still becoming. That's right. Still becoming. And Summur, thank you for everything. And we'll say goodbye to our audience. And
Yeah,
everybody
we'll
have
say
a good.
goodbye. Hey, what's with that Grammy award up there on that shelf behind you, Summur?
Oh yeah, let's get this
Is
in.
that a Grammy award? That looks like the Grammys.
I
That's
had
Summer's own Grammy award. I want you to know.
yes, yes. We will link the movie in the comments. So
There you go.
Or at least the recording, right?
exactly.
I mean,
Exactly.
it's a Grammy.
There you go.
That's right. That's
Unless you
right.
have an
That's
Academy
right.
Award back there too.
That's right.
That's right.
We'll link the audio. Yes, that's right.
Thanks
That's
everyone
right.
for being with us. Like and subscribe, and check out Radio Free Mormon's new podcasts that are coming up.
Summer's
And
one of the few people who have actually won the EGOT.
Yes. No, actually, I'm missing one, unfortunately.
Is it the T?
No, I got a Tony. It's the
Oscar.
Oscar, I believe, is the one I'm missing.
There you go.
So
Well,
I will not be
this is-
linking the movie.
If we turn this episode into movie form, which is almost at
It
movie
is.
length, maybe
This
we'll
is the
submit
director's cut by now.
We'll submit it to the Oscars and see what our luck is for.
You could have
Just
it as a
for Summer.
documentary.
Yes.
That's right, documentary. All right, goodbye, everybody.
Good night, everybody. Thank you so
Bye.
much for having me on.
Thank you for coming on.